Welcome back to another episode of the Max Stern Podcast. Kyle Stitch here alongside James Finch. And today, as promised, if you listened to our last episode, we are going to go through our, extension projections. So these are players that are eligible to sign a contract anytime between now and July 1st, basically. So these are extension projections and kind of what the rental landscape is going to look like as this NHL season progresses, trade deadline gets closer and closer. Last episode, we had talked about kind of good starts, poor starts to the season. So this is kind of in tandem, who might be early buyers, who might be early sellers, which players might they be targeting type thing. So we appreciate you listening. Max Stern Podcast available on pretty much all major podcast platforms. Contract projections are on X at AFP Analytics. It's in the pinned tweet. All these extensions we're talking about are in the pinned tweet. It's been there since May. We added to our original. Probably sometime around the new year, we will do a midterm update to see where these players are trending. But I guess we'll kind of holistically give a little bit of a view of that now as well after a month of the season. So start with the top names in the marketplace. I think what's important to point out here is we have not rerun these since Leon Draisaitl's contract has been signed. So he was one that was originally included. He obviously received that from the Oilers. So his contract is going to factor into some of these top forwards that you're about to hit on. I'll just say he's probably going to help pull the price tag up a little bit on the top guys, especially this who we have currently as the highest, Mikko Rantanen.
Yeah, so in general, we'll have to see how it impacts the tier below. I don't know if it necessarily will, but it could be a sign of contracts moving a touch higher. So Mikko Rantanen, we had a projection of 8 years, kind of expected it to fall in the 12 to 12 and a half. Obviously, like you mentioned, that could end up being a little bit higher, especially with where Draisaitl had signed. 8 years, $14 million. Right in that same group with Rantanen is Marner. We had 7 years, right in that similar range, but maybe just a touch below. So we had about like 11.8 is the low, 12.3, 12.4 is the high. So a touch below Rantanen, but very much in the same group. So those two are clear franchise level players. I think one of them is way more likely to stay with his team, Rantanen with Colorado. Not necessarily a given it happens because that's a big cap number to fit, but feels much more likely, especially when you're talking about a top player. They generally tend to stay. Mitch Marner, on the other hand, it was just very tumultuous over the offseason. And even kind of during the year last year. For Marner to stay there, it would pretty much be the Maple Leafs organization doubling down on how they've gone about roster construction, pretty much paying a handful of top forwards a lot of money and not having a whole lot left over for the rest of the roster.
And if they kept Marner, it would also basically keep the same salary structure as they've had. I know higher numbers, but
right.
Matthews fouled by Marner, fouled by Nylander.
Yep.
Yeah.
Which I think we questioned it a lot of, hey, maybe it's time to ultimately not have your roster constructed that way. I think a lot of people questioned it over the offseason. There were a lot of rumors, is Marner actually going to stay there? So I don't know. This might be one where the player hits free agency and we might see Marner with a different team. And if that's the case, that is another reason, I guess, that we could see a little bit of a bump in the ultimate cap number that he ends up with. Draisaitl helping pull him up a little bit, but also being the top player, a franchise level player on the open market, is good usually when it comes to how much money you're going to receive each year.
So, again, pointing out the fact that these projections were run and published on July 1st. So, contracts that have been signed since then are not factored in.
Right.
So, that brings us to Igor Shesterkin.
So, I mean, this is the loud contract situation right now. One of the ones that was almost expected to happen already. And I mean, we see someone like a Kevin Weeks putting posts out, kind of getting people excited, thinking something's coming. Shesterkin did not have a great start to the season last year. Ended up finishing the season very well and having a great playoff. Pretty much comes out, wants a large amount of money, wants to beat Carey Price. He's a very good goalie. I think there's arguments that, yeah, he should be paid as a top goalie. It's just, what does getting paid like a top goalie really mean right now? He may kind of reset the definition there. Rumors of 11 and a half. So we'll see. Our projection, again, that was released and out there for this off season. So back in the summer, start of the summer, really, 7 years in the 9.8 to 10.3 range. Full disclosure, I expect him to for sure beat those numbers at this point. The interesting thing, in my opinion, is when a player doesn't sign an extension, it's like, okay, you better play well the upcoming season. And he's arguably the best goalie in hockey right now. So good first month is probably just helping raise the price. So it might have been something the Rangers should have given in on during the summer. But we'll see. This is something that it could be done tomorrow. It could be all the way up to July 1st, and I don't think the Rangers can let him hit the market, but situations sometimes just play out where they might not have a choice. The closer he gets to free agency, he might say, you know what, I'm going to test it out, and maybe that's just to get the price up, or maybe he goes somewhere.
The closer he gets, the better he plays. And I had pointed out, again, the fact that these don't include a lot of recent contracts signed, so Saros not included, although I don't know if his contract really factors in. I think the big one that maybe pushes the landscape up more is Swayman, and that occurred. They're not comparable, but they are in that it's helping to push the overall goalie landscape up.
Yes, correct. Yeah, so that's potentially a market changer for goalies, which Swayman's was, so I almost expect this one will be too. Those are really what I would say, at least, and I'm guessing you probably agree, that's like the top of the UFA market.
Yeah, with no slight to Brock Besser.
No, but it's a tier below. Like so looking at wingers, he's not in the group with Rantanen and Marner. He's a group below. He's a very good player. He's a first-line winger. He will score you a lot of goals, but it is a tier down from those elite franchise level guys.
I think him pointing out what Travis Konecny's contract was this offseason there's your comp. He
Yeah.
should come in right above where Konecki did, maybe a little bit higher if he has another good year. Jake Gensel would be another good comp. Yeah.
Yep.
So Besser should be right in there.
That's about where we would have expected him to be. So our range was like 8.6 to 9. That's right there with the guys you mentioned.
Exactly. So might come a little bit higher, but
potentially.
But yeah, it makes complete sense. But yeah, he's the next. And do we entertain the idea of Brad Marchand hitting the market, or is that assumed that gets done? Because he's really the other. There's a couple other potentially attractive forward names.
I wonder just if this season continues to stay south, not even go south, but stay south for the Bruins. I think anything's kind of on the table there. Could easily come back. He's the captain, but maybe they decide it's kind of time for a new direction, kind of pretty much hand it over to the new generation of Bruins, I guess. They're not new, but Pasternak, McAvoy, Swayman is kind of the next generation away from the Bergeron, Krejci, Marchand. So I think he stays, but I could easily see him hit the market. So our projection really quick, we had 3 years somewhere in the 7.7 to 8.1. The way the season's gone, I think that's one that's trending down, which is another factor that can sometimes lead players or teams to decide, all right, go ahead to the free agent market.
One kind of not something that we can't really factor in, we can a little bit, is Marchand's been in Boston for a long, long time. He has made plenty of good money. I'm not going to knock that. But he's probably been someone who, over the course of his career, has taken less and never really been financially rewarded for that. I wonder if he looks around at his teammates at some point and like, wow, all you guys have gotten what you actually deserve, and I've always taken less. If he asks for fair value, and if that becomes a sticking point with the team and player, because I agree he's probably trending down, but if I'm Boston management and he came to me asking for $7 to $7.5 million for like 3-4 years, and you're trying to negotiate below that yet again, I think you might need to be fully prepared for him to say, I'm done. I'm done doing this for you.
I think that's definitely possible, especially if this season does not go as they would hope. Emotions might not be in a, I'll take less money type of mood, I guess.
I think one more winger name that I want to hit on, maybe two more. Nikolai Ehlers, Winnipeg. He might be one of the more attractive unrestricted free agents because of play relative to cost. There could actually be some value
potentially
there.
So we had 6 years, 6.8 to 7.2. So I guess you could say in general 6x7 was generally what we were thinking. I could see that still kind of being the general area he falls.
I was going to say, that's right around where Pavel Buchnevich ended up, I believe.
So he ended up 6x8.
Okay, he did. Okay.
So he was up a little bit.
Okay. So that would come a little bit below him. Ehlers and Buchnevich to me are pretty strong comps. I'm not going to say perfect, but
it could pull him up a little bit. I think issue with Ehlers, injuries in the past. Last year, I don't think there was much of that. And if he puts together another pretty healthy season, I don't think that will really follow him. Or so like I could see him getting bumped up a little bit to 7.5 in that range, maybe a little higher. The other thing to think about here is we're mentioning Ronson and Marner, and then we drop down a little bit, Besser, Marchand. It's very possible all of, or maybe most of these players don't hit the free agent market. So if one of them does, like it's very possible Ehlers is the best forward on the market, or Besser is. So like, and that can drive up price in itself.
Yeah.
So
yeah, or two of that. Even if Ehlers is number 2, say it's Marner and Ehlers, which feels very possible.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Then Ehlers is of that like next category. He's the top guy. It's very possible just the overall landscape of who's out there drives prices up.
And I don't know what type of relationship there is in Winnipeg, but it feels like there's been so much smoke around a Nick Ehlers trade for almost the entire length of his contract. So you wonder if he's going to stay, if he's going to make Winnipeg pony up, or if there really just is not much interest there and it's time to move on.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think
UFA forwards.
Yeah, I was gonna maybe Tavares, Giroux. Giroux will touch a little bit more on a little bit later. Tavares, I think he could go any direction. I mean, we got a projection here in like the $7 million range.
I could very much see that. I could see him staying in Toronto at that.
I could see him staying in Toronto for less.
Yeah. Well, so, I mean, the way I look at it, what I think ends up happening with Toronto is Marner leaves, Tavares stays at a much lower cap hit like this, or even a touch lower, just from a cap management standpoint. Honestly, the only way I see that not being the case is if they win a cup and they want to try and run things back. But yeah, so maybe that's one where he takes a little bit less, actually, for the betterment of the team. I don't know if he leaves Toronto. So.
Yeah. And again, if he comes in taking a hometown discount at that point in his career, I wouldn't be shocked.
Nope.
So let's hit some of the top defensemen and then kind of move into some of the potential rental players.
Yeah.
Because there's not a ton of overlap between the top players and the rental market here.
So defenseman starts lower as far as, I guess, tier or level of player. So still good, but Aaron Ekblad.
I think you skipped over someone that's projected a touch higher than Ekblad.
Did I?
Yeah, Jacob Chychrun is projected a touch higher than Ekblad. So Ekblad we got in the 7.5 to 7.75.
Oh, I did.
Chychrun's like the 7.75 to like 8.5. I guess really 8 to 8.5 type range.
So kind of similar level of player. Chychrun being a little bit younger, a couple of years. I guess these two will matter in relation to each other. It'll also be interesting to see because we do have Chychrun a touch above, but Ekblad's a right shot, and that can sometimes help players. There's usually a little bit of a premium. That said, Ekblad, I could easily see signing a pretty friendly extension with Florida, which I think that went into our projection a little bit. Chychrun may be the top defenseman on the market. We'll see what the Capitals decide to do. Carlson's still there at a bigger number. They just signed Matt Roy. Matt Roy is a good defenseman and it's a good contract, but having just signed a fairly larger defensive contract, maybe Chychrun hits the market because he'll be expecting more. We'll see, but that's pretty much, I would say, the top, and then it drops a little bit to like Neil Pionk.
I'd say a little more than a little.
Yeah, I guess. I mean, Pionk's fine.
Yeah,
But yeah, I guess you're kind of at Pionk, Provorov, Brent Burns if he
40-year-old
makes it
Brett
out
Burns,
there. Yeah. So
yeah, that's
Gavrikov, Marcus Pettersson, Orlov. So yeah, it's not great.
one of my things that I've been kind of pointing out as each defenseman's been like Jake McCabe signed. I did a little snapshot episode the other week, and I kind of talked a little bit about it, like the defensive market. Not that the rental market was going to be robust anyways, but like the defensive market's thinning as each contract signed. It's getting thinner and thinner, and like Ekblad, I don't expect to hit the market.
Yeah.
So it's Chikrin.
Yeah.
And then it's those other guys we listed, and like.
So yeah, I mean, Hedman signed, Slavin, Adam Larson, good defensively, Essel and Dell. These are all guys that got done. You mentioned McCabe,
Shea Theodore
recently, even someone like a Jake Middleton from Minnesota, solid signed. Those names I ran through at this point in their careers, I guess Pettersson could be a good option, like a second pair. Orlov at this point in his career, not great. From there, it really drops down to like the Cody Cece's, Will Borgen, Braden McNabb, which you can find value in that group, but you're moving away from top four. Dante Fabro, like it's you'll find names in kind of that bottom four group, but there's not much out there if you need like a clear top three defenseman, I'd say.
Yeah.
It's Chikrin.
Yeah.
And Ekblad if he hits, but neither one of us think that's going to happen.
No, there's a very realistic scenario, like the second or third best defenseman on the market is arguably Marcus Pettersson.
Yeah.
And he might get paid as such, and that's going to be an instant, almost regret contract.
Well, so there were rumors initially that like they were talking extension, him and the Penguins, and Penguins I think put it on hold because of overall how the team's performing. Could end up in a rental type situation, but just really quick
before I take that transition and run with it to the rental market. Okay.
Yes, because we might as well do it since we just did it for the other positions. We mentioned Shesterkin for goalies. If you've listened to past episodes, if you listened to the most recent episode before this one, you heard a lot about how one of my guys, and when we say that, it's not a good thing. There's Shesterkin, and then drop down a little bit.
A little.
So this is an interesting one because I think he's going to get a contract, or at least as of the past offseason when we did these projections, I thought he's going to get a contract that he absolutely should not get. Alex Gorgiev for Colorado might be the top, or perceived as the top goalie on the market. If he continues playing the way he is this year, he won't be, but he's one of the potential starters that you could sign. Then there's Aiden Hill, a little bit better. You have Charlie Lindgren, Husso, Freddie Anderson, Vanacek, Vizmelka.
Missed Logan Thompson, one of the probably better options out there.
I did miss Logan Thompson.
From
Okay, so Logan Thompson, Aiden Hill, Charlie Lindgren. Yeah. Kind of, there's a group right there, but it's not the worst goalie market that there's been. It's not the best.
Yeah.
So, like, if you're a team needing a clear starter franchise goaltender, you're like praying the Rangers mess things up with Shesterkin and he hits the market. I think that's very unlikely, but you never know.
Can I point out the kind of funny thing with Georgiev's contract is almost exactly what Tristan Jarry got, like, if we were to adjust Jari's contract into like the current or projected cap, that's basically what Georgiev's projected at.
Well,
And the fact that those two are like direct comps, I think says it all.
So for anyone that doesn't know, they haven't really looked at our projection spreadsheet in depth. There's a lot of columns. We've got a lot of information in there. And in the past year, maybe, I don't know, did we do it last year? We put comps in there. Maybe.
I think last mid-season we might have started doing comps.
So we don't put every single comp that helps us get to our number, but we pick up to 5 and put them in here. Some of the main comps. I'm going to run through the main comps for Georgiev. Martin Jones, Tristan Jarry, Robin Lehner, Jack Campbell, Cam Talbot.
Obviously, there's a little cherry pick. I think there's a little cherry picking there, but like, yeah.
Well, I mean, yes and no. Maybe I should do like a snapshot episode at some point on Alex Georgiev. Those were kind of the like main goalies he compares to statistically.
I think the only one missing is Phil Grubauer another one of your guys.
Probably a good comp too.
It probably it's probably even in the like output.
It is probably in our output. Yeah. So I guess not to beat up on Georgiev too much. Goalie market's okay. It's not great. Something to keep in mind. Strength of this class is probably forward. Goalie's okay. It's defensively it's a little thin and it could get much thinner pretty quickly.
It's a lot thinner on a whole as this past offseason's market.
Past offseason was pretty good. Yeah. Like that was almost an ideal market.
Yeah. I mean, so I guess I'm factoring in expecting most the top guys that you started with to stay.
Yeah.
But that suddenly changes if a Rantanen or Marner and or Besser, Shesterkin type players hit the market. I'm thinking maybe one of them. Maybe.
I hope so because it's more fun.
Oh yeah,
it's just more fun for everyone.
It gives us more content to talk about.
Yeah, it's when there is an elite level player on the market. It makes free agency more exciting.
Yeah.
So I always say I like chaos, and hopefully none of them sign an extension.
Yeah. Or at least drag it out long enough so we can get like 5 episodes out of talking about their potential.
Or we get like a Rantanen for Shesterkin trade. That'd be fun. UFA for UFA.
So
that'd be fun.
That would be a lot of fun, and like that would make a lot of sense.
Well, that's why I said it. Yeah. I wouldn't have said it if it was dumb. That makes a lot of sense for both teams. It doesn't make sense for the Rangers, but if they know Shesterkin's leaving, it would make a lot of sense.
Yeah. Colorado, we could debate as well because having Rantanen as one of their top 6 forwards is pretty important as well. But man,
it is. But
we won't go down that rabbit hole.
But
when the smoke starts going
that's
around, you heard it here first.
Different time.
You heard the idea here first.
It'd be fun.
I think. I mean, we didn't talk about the RFAs, but like I don't know. Maybe at some point we'll do a little bit more on like pending RFAs, but I'm more interested, I think, in the rental market right now. I mean, the RFAs, someone could get done, but if I'm an RFA at this point, unless I'm having a blazing start to the season and a team wants to throw kind of like stupid money at me, I have no incentive to sign.
Generally, you don't want to be the first to sign. It might not be the greatest example, but once Brock Faber signed, we're like, okay, we know where Sider's coming in.
Correct.
So like generally, if you're the first, other players are going to start to sign right above you. So there's no reason to rush for an RFA. So 100%, unless there's an amazing offer, like why right now? Let the season play out.
Yeah. I mean, perfect example to demonstrate that point. Evan Bouchard and Noah Dobson should both get very similar contracts.
Yeah.
Whoever basically puts their signature on the contract first is going to get less money.
Yeah.
Yeah. Not by a lot, but but a little bit because that's just how it's going to work. Rental market.
Yep.
Again, I mean, the unrestricted free agent class is looking thin. And a lot of the top guys, we haven't really highlighted a lot of the guys that I think could be available rentals because Toronto's, I highly doubt, is trading Marner unless they can make fairly significant hockey trade. I don't even know what that looks like at this point because another team would need to be able to take on that money.
The thing with that too is like defensively, I guess they always end up trading for defensemen, so they could acquire a defenseman, but they need forward depth usually. So like trading one of your best forwards in season, I don't know if like you get 2 forward NHL roster forwards back in season for Martin. I don't know.
The closest to a hockey trade that I think was there, and I highlighted this in the snapshot episode, was Shea Theodore.
Yeah,
and that contract's done now, and that's now, so that's not happening.
Yeah.
So Marner's probably not available. Rottenen's definitely not available. Besser, I highly doubt's available. Jacob Chikrin is maybe the first name, but with the start the Capitals are off to right now, I don't see them selling. If things go south, maybe he becomes available. The Capitals, I guess, are a team could justify selling if the marketplace is correct. So maybe a team can make an offer to the Capitals to get Chikrin. I don't think they have.
Well, they're also a team, like you said, they're playing well, but if they regress a little bit, which is plausible, I guess, like it could happen.
And I mean, just from their perspective, they're not winning the cup. I highly doubt they're winning the cup.
Tell Ovechkin that.
Well, I mean,
I know what you mean, though.
But like,
I know what you mean.
If they can get a really good asset or a couple assets for him, they should consider doing it. But I would not be shocked if they just view him as their own rental and see what happens.
Yeah.
And Brad Marchand, I highly doubt, but if things go completely south in Boston, every single team that's anywhere near the playoffs wants him.
Oh, yeah.
And Boston could recoup some very nice futures very quickly.
Yes.
But he also, I believe, has trade protection, so would need to consent to something.
And so if it were to get to the point where Boston is thinking about doing that, it could also be at the point where Marchand's okay with a trade, but that trade protection would probably lower the price ultimately.
Yeah.
So it might not be as great for the Bruins. But it's neither here or there at this point. He could potentially. It's not crazy to see the scenario. It's probably unlikely.
Ekblad's not being traded.
No.
Ehlers, highly doubt it. Winnipeg would have to drop off dramatically.
Yeah, that would be unforeseen.
Tavares not happening.
Nope.
Claude Giroux with Ottawa. This is the first, maybe he's available. I mean, it depends where Ottawa's in the standings. But he's also one of those veteran players that teams, if he asked the team to be sent to a contender, teams often would oblige, and there's nothing preventing him from signing back in Ottawa in the offseason either. He's the first. I think he would be the top name right now on my rental trade target board. And I might have one or two other names, and we'll get there in a second. But he's one of the top names on my board right now.
I think I have 2 names that I would put in the same group, so I'm not going to dispute 2 forwards. Well,
yeah. So I'll
maybe just 2 in general.
Frank Vetrano.
Yep.
Brock Nelson.
Yeah.
So there's
that's kind of right now the top group.
Yep. With a couple other forwards, I think close. We'll get to them in a second. But so Giroux is is the first name, at least in like our projected value for next year we get to. But him and Vetrano and Nelson would be to me in a similar realm if I'm looking to acquire a player. Giroux of those three might be the least available because Ottawa's off to a good start and I think would prefer to make a push for the playoffs. But so
Yeah.
his availability, I think, is a question mark. Him being one of the better available players is definitely not a question mark.
Yeah.
Probably the best forward is going to be available is Frank Vetrano.
Yeah. That's the clearly 100% he's available.
So if you're a team that needs goals and you don't have a ton of cap space, he should be your number one target. Any teams come to mind as making sense for Vetrano? I have one off the top of my head that, like, once all the dust settles, would make a ton of sense.
So I'm trying to look and see who you're thinking of. Vegas?
Well, that's a good one. That was not who I was thinking of, but that makes a ton of sense.
Go ahead.
Colorado.
Okay, that was like my second one.
Yeah.
I should have said it.
Colorado and then the Rangers.
Yeah.
Those would be back to New York.
Rangers, that's one I think last year when his name was coming up, I guess all three of these teams were probably teams we mentioned, but Rangers I remember specifically. Yeah, all would be a good fit. And I think another thing to remember, even though he's in that group with Giroux and Nelson, that lower cap hit and Anaheim potentially being able to retain on that as well and further lowering it.
Maybe even find a middleman and get that really $1 million cap hit.
Right. And so that could drive up the price. Like he could be the most expensive of those three through trade, especially with Giroux, if he were to be moved, potentially being a smaller return because of that trade protection. So it could get pricey to acquire Vetrano, but there's a reason he is in that group of names, and then add on the contract situation. Yeah.
Brock Nelson, I think quality-wise is right up there. I don't know where the Islanders' thought process will be. Like, he could be available right now.
So I wanted to say that's the one I'm kind of wondering about for the Islanders, with kind of the rumors they might be looking to do something. Whatever trade they make, they have to move someone off of the NHL roster just because he's the obvious rental type player, not necessarily a long-term piece. Maybe they view him as that still, but I wonder if he's available right now in the right deal.
I think one team you had thrown out as an idea was the Buffalo Sabres, and I think the Islanders and Sabres could make sense to hook up here.
Yeah.
Nelson goes to Buffalo. Sabres have a kind of a small surplus of defensemen. That's kind of where the Islanders seem to be a little thin.
So what I could see is whether it's a Yoki Haru or maybe they want it to be a little bigger and it's a Samuelson. Buffalo has enough assets and they're deep enough defensively that I could see it being like a defenseman and a league minimum cheap forward to the Islanders. It could be a Yoki Haru and name a borderline NHL prospect for Nelson. That type of deal. It would seem to make sense, especially with both teams supposedly out there looking to potentially make a move now.
Yep, it would also fill in as you said, the needs for both teams. So the other, I guess there's another Islander forward that could be attractive to probably contenders because there's some trade protection here. Kyle Palmieri coming off a big goal scoring season. His cap hit is not unreasonable either. It's a little bit higher if you're some of those teams we had mentioned with Vetrano. You need some retention. I wonder if Palmieri, he's a Detroit player. to me. Like I know we're super early in the season, but like if Detroit stays in contention, he's the type of player the Detroit Red Wings would go out and acquire, in my opinion. I'm just spitballing that off the top of my head, but
maybe. I don't know. Just scored like 40 goals. That's not a Red Wings player.
Well, that's who they acquire at the deadline, and then let walk in. No, I don't know.
I mean, it's someone they should definitely target if they're in contention for sure. Yeah, I don't know. So I just wonder from an Islanders perspective, like what. I don't know. I guess I've always kind of wondered like what exactly is their plan, but even now, trade wise, like the rumors of them looking to make a move, it's just like I think I can pick out who they might be willing to trade, but I could be completely wrong. Like they could have absolutely no interest in moving those two.
Yeah, they could have extensions. Lou could have extensions sitting in his back pocket for both of them. Yeah.
So we'll see. If either of those Islanders are available, they will be very much sought after.
If they finally pull the trigger to acquire some younger and future assets, those are the two players that are going to yield strong results. Anders Lee's not a rental, but he would be not far behind as well.
Yep.
If you're looking for a slightly younger forward, I got a couple names for you. I think probably my preferred of the two actually would be Andrei Kuzmenko, followed by Andrew Mangiapane.
Ooh.
You've been a big Mangiapane guy over the years. I would favor Kuzmenko.
I don't know who I would favor. So I guess I couldn't even tell you right now. I'd kind of want to see how like the first half of the season plays out for both. Both I think would be good additions. I'm curious to see how Mangiapane is like kind of. All right, you're out of Calgary. How are you performing now? Like new team, what kind of player are you?
After settling in more than basically month in the season.
Right. Yeah.
And I think the logic that we talked about with Chychrun also applies to Mangiapane too, is how available is he going to be?
Yeah. Exactly the same as Chychrun, I think.
So Kuzmenko should be available from the Calgary Flames.
Should be, yeah.
I think he's a tier below those other forwards, but he's someone that I would, if I'm a team looking for an improvement on my roster, but not breaking the bank trade asset wise, he might be one of my guys that I'm looking at.
Yeah, I would say so.
And then a couple others I'd throw in that category. Forward wise, we'll get to defense in a minute. Yanni Gourde. Alex Kerfoot, maybe.
Yeah.
Maybe Mikael Granlund, who's been a up and down player the past couple of years.
That would be an interesting one. I almost feel like he ends up getting traded. Whether he fits in with whoever acquires him, I think, is a big question mark. But yeah, I don't know if I would target him if I'm a GM. It would have to be like a perfect fit.
Yeah.
Like pretty much need some offense, some goals, and then like I don't care if you don't play defense type of move.
And it should be pointed out that San Jose can't retain salary, so you would have to be able to absorb his full cap hit or find a middleman.
And pay for finding that middleman.
Yeah. Because San Jose has used all 3 retention slots.
Yeah.
A couple other forwards. These would be more third.
Yeah.
I got a couple third line guys, and then I have a couple RFAs. Philadelphia Flyer RFAs. Again, probably more third line, but Jordan Greenway has been tremendous in Buffalo. Right now, if the Sabres are going to try to make a playoff push, they keep him.
Yes.
And just let him walk because they don't necessarily need more future assets. They need to win now. So I don't know how.
They very much do need to win now.
So I don't know how available he is, but if they are clearly out of playoff contention come trade deadline, a lot of teams are going to line up for them, and they'll just get another very attractive future asset.
Yeah.
Boston has a couple more guys that, again, depending where the season goes, Trent Frederick is going, if Boston's willing to move him, would yield a very nice return for them.
I think that name's already out there a little bit.
It is.
Like maybe it was like a teams are calling or something. I don't remember exactly what it was, but that's the type of player you acquire for the playoffs.
Yep.
Like easily, 100%. So he would be, teams would be lining up for Frederick.
Cheap, center flexibility, physical, can score some goals.
Yep.
Younger, like playoff experience.
Yeah.
He probably gets he very likely might get Boston a first if they wanted to move him.
He's like a good Paul Gaustad.
There's a throwback name right there.
Yeah.
For all you younger people listening. Yeah.
No offense to Paul Gaustad, he was fun to watch.
Yeah, he that might be one of the biggest, like the shockingest returns on trade deadline day ever.
Yeah.
Outside of Philip Forsberg for Martin Erat.
Yeah.
And those were I don't think those were the same year, but they were very close to each other.
Both back a little bit, so it was definitely close. Anyways,
other Boston forward Morgan Geekie. I mean, who knows? Like
solid.
He's a solid role player, depth player.
Yeah.
Gustav Nyquist, if Nashville's willing to sell, would be very attractive for a lot of teams. Playoff experience, good two-way player.
Yeah.
Taylor Hall, I don't know what's going on in Chicago with him. I don't know how attractive he would be.
That feels like something that, they'd have to retain a bit of money, and even then, some teams might not quite be able to make it work. But that, I want to say, at least from Chicago's perspective, that's inevitable.
It should be.
They signed some veteran forwards this past offseason. It's not like you need to keep Taylor Hall around still. 1-year deal, get some assets for him.
Yeah.
If teams want him.
Yeah. I mean, that's where maybe
I feel like someone will. For sure.
How much is that some token value worth? Another Chicago player that I don't know where the market would be is Ryan Donato. Good goal scorer, but there's maybe not a complete game there.
That feels like a bottom 6 move that is almost. This is not at all a knock on Donato. That almost feels like a move a team makes. Like, okay, we want to make sure we have some depth. We're going to acquire this guy. Might not even play all the time, but also could play every single game the rest of the year, and we'd be fine with it. Cheaper contract. Yeah, I don't know. I think he could definitely be moved.
Again,
though.
like a Colorado or Vegas.
Yeah.
Makes sense there. Who have had some like rotating forward cast.
Right.
Two last UFAs that would be playoff acquisitions. Screen playoff acquisitions. Tanner Jeannot, I don't know how available. I don't want to spend a ton of time. He's who knows.
Yeah.
I don't know how he's been fitting in LA, and I don't know if LA would even be willing to sell. But he's the type of player, teams like to acquire.
Yeah.
My big one that I think would be an under the radar one that a lot of teams would be lining up for is Brandon Tanev from Seattle Kraken.
That's a playoff.
That's a playoff player.
Forward.
Yeah.
Fourth line, just fast, will hit you and hit you hard. That's the classic playoff guy to acquire. It's the Bruins trading for like Hathaway. That's Hathaway might be a little bit better defensively, but Tanev, like that's the style of move a team would be going for. I could 100% see that.
Yep. Couple RFA forwards real quick. Again, I don't know what we talked last episode about both of these names. Noah Cates, Tyson Forster. I think I had said it sometime in the offseason. Philadelphia at some point needs to just make a decision on some of these, like, they're not old guys, but they're older RFAs, and they're starting to run the clock out.
I'll say of those two names, Cates would feel way more likely to me. Forster, I think they may still view as like a higher in the lineup type of player, where Cates, I think, is very much settling in to kind of being that good third line guy. That feels a little more likely. He might even be a touch older than Forster.
I think he is, yeah.
Or like a couple of years. So it wouldn't shock me for someone to be moved out there. I'd even say like a Scott Lawton.
Yeah,
we've been saying that for years.
I know. Forgot to highlight his name.
But
yeah.
Yeah, I could see I would be much less surprised if Cates was moved. Yeah. Forster would surprise me a little bit.
Oh, I don't disagree. It's more the Flyers. I just have more questions about what they're trying to accomplish, more so than if I'm Danny Briere, I'm not moving Forster. Cates, I might move for the right offer.
Yeah,
but
yep.
Defense, as alluded to, pretty thin.
Yeah.
Let me throw this name out. I don't think he's going to be available, and that's Vladislav Gavrikov, because I think the Kings, right now they're playing good hockey. If that continues, they're not trading him. If he becomes available, he's probably the most attractive name out there.
Yeah, I would say so.
Unless Chychrun's available.
Right, yeah. Yes.
Those two probably fall in the same category. So realistically, probably the top two defensemen available. Hold on to your chairs, folks. Ivan Provorov and Marcus Pettersson. Provorov with Columbus right now, Pettersson with Pittsburgh.
Pettersson's fine.
Yeah, I mean,
he's not like a top pair guy, but
no,
like you're fine.
Provorov's been actually okay in Columbus. I mean, if you can get him with there's already retained salary. If you can get some even more retained salary, I wouldn't have a problem pulling that trigger if I needed a defenseman, especially looking at who's available.
There's potentially a name or two lower on the list that I would be, well, I wouldn't even say a name or two. I'd say probably one name lower on the list that I'd be curious about. Probably costs less and cap hit is less. I'll see if you mention him. You probably will.
Will Borgen.
Yep.
Yeah, because he's my next, I guess, available player.
From like, go ahead and talk about Will Borgen.
I mean, you talk about playoff guys, playoff players, big, physical,
yep,
pretty good two-way, right shot defenseman, second pair flexibility for sure. I mean, if you're a good acquiring team, you feel great if you can put him on your third pair.
Right.
I mean, that's what a playoff team might be acquiring him for, but he's playing minutes. He's the top right shot D that will probably be available at the deadline by a mile. Maybe not a mile, but yeah.
That to me feels very much like it's not exactly the same, but like Colorado acquiring Manson a few years ago.
Yeah.
That type of, they're similar.
Yeah, they are.
So that's kind of what you would be acquiring. It again, cheap contract. If any salaries retained, much cheaper. Probably doesn't cost you as much as the top names you had. Maybe. I don't know. This is where it gets funky because there's what we see and what I'll say we think we know. I'd rather have Borgen, I think, than some of those other names, but I don't know if that's actual perception around the league. He's a good player, but he might not be seen on the level of those other guys.
I mean, I think it's also a little what fit and style you're looking for to plug in your lineup because Provorov and Borgen are very different players.
Yes.
Pettersson and Borgen would be a little bit more similar, but Borgen's a right shot, bigger, more physical.
Right.
And so I would push back a little on like Borgen might be asset acquisition wise a little cheaper because him and Cody CC are the two right D that I see as viable trade targets right now.
That's true.
And a lot of teams are going to be looking for right D. They're going to be looking for physical guys. Borgen's significantly better.
Yes. Yeah, I suppose that's true. There's not really much else out there.
And
well, at least as of right now, it doesn't seem like there will be much else out there.
As far as right shot guys go, maybe Dante Fabro.
Yeah, I think I still go Borgen, and I don't think he quite brings the same elements you were talking about. So
again, that's a little bit more what style, what flair are you looking for, Borgen versus Fabro. I'm not disagreeing with you, but that's maybe someone you could talk yourself into. But like,
even so, this might be jumping ahead of you a little bit. There's no RFAs, really, right shots that I would expect to be moved.
I guess one other rental, David Savard, right shot D. He probably fetches the biggest trade price from name value. I'm not saying he should.
Maybe, but at this point, maybe not.
Again, Will Borgen. Yeah. Will Borgen to me is
the clear right shot defenseman to acquire.
If you're looking for there's pure rental, yeah.
If there is a name that pops up that like no one expected, okay, but well, even as a rental, like I don't see that happening.
No,
it would be someone with term left potentially.
Yeah,
Ekblad's not going anywhere. Winnipeg is not going to trade Pionk. Carolina's not trading Burns
or Orlov for that.
Or Orlov,
yeah. He's not right shot, but
in the past, I think he had played on his offhand at some point. Yeah, there's not even there's no other potential right shot UFAs.
One other, Henry Jokiharju from Buffalo. We mentioned him earlier. I'd take Borgen over him for sure, but like.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm just throwing out like
that's true.
Passable second, third pair defensemen. Yeah. I think ignoring Jokiharju would be a little bit. I mean, he's the next, but unless he stays out of favor in Buffalo, the same logic that we talked about with Jordan Greenway applies there.
Yes.
They're going to keep him unless they know that they have better options in-house or they are so far out of the playoffs.
Yep.
And, yeah, you nailed it on the restricted free agent defenseman. I don't have anyone.
Let me look again really quick.
As a shock, but, yeah.
I don't see right shot and even left shot, like maybe a Romanov from the Islanders.
Yeah, I had him highlighted and then kind of removed him because the Islanders need
defensemen. Yeah. Yeah, that's looking at the RFA list, you start to get down to like guys who are kind of prospects almost. They're not anymore, but like why would the team trade them at that point?
I guess I have one interesting name as far as RFA.
Yeah.
I guess there's two that fall in this category.
I might be thinking it right now, but go ahead.
Vegas has a couple extra defensemen. Nick Hague and Braden McNabb. McNabb, if I'm Vegas, I'm not trading because he's a physical stay-at-home. He's really good at what he does.
Yeah.
And Haig to me is I think I hit on it in the snapshot episode after I talked about Theodore. Pretty sure I had talked about how Nick Haig might be the odd man out because he's more of the puck moving in the Hannafin Theodore mold. I mean, Pietrangelo is just a very solid all around guy, but Haig's behind both Theodore and Hannafin at this point as far as like puck moving guys go. He might be the name, but I think that's more of a hockey trade.
Yeah. Because I don't think they move him just to move him during the season. But that said, they have 8 defensemen on the NHL roster.
Yep.
We were saying it for a while with Theodore, and then he signed the extension. It could make sense to move Haig. RFA. Last RFA year is this next year. Arbitration. It's probably the time they move him. So maybe, yeah, if something popped up in season, that wouldn't be shocking.
I mean, spitballing him for Noah Cates would make sense.
Yeah.
Potentially. I mean,
Right.
Again, depending where Philadelphia is, but like if value-wise,
that's probably about right.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll see. That's an interesting one. It's always tough to predict those when it's a team that's going to contend trading a roster piece like that, but they have the depth to do it defensively.
Yeah, I mean, if they can move him to improve their forward group,
right,
they should.
I don't want to go as far as saying it's a no-brainer, but it's close. Like what's happening with Vegas right now is, I think, exactly what we thought, pretty much. I think that they're going to be acquiring forwards. Question's how. That's a potentially good way to acquire. Kind of don't deplete your futures that you still have, or maybe just don't deplete your futures even more than you already have. And if I think there's a good chance Haig would move anyways this offseason, so maybe you were willing to do that.
Yeah, unless there's, knock on wood, an injury on defense, that changes things.
Pietrangelo's 34. Theodore, that could happen.
I mean, it could, and that changes the equation a little bit. But yeah, if you're healthy on the blue line going towards the trade deadline, Nick Haig should be an asset that can help improve your forward group.
Yep.
So, anyone else that we want to hit on before we kind of wrap up this evening?
I don't think so. No, I think at least as of right now, we've pretty much touched on everything. I mean, I guess if we wanted to, goalie market's probably thin.
Trading for a rental goalie just doesn't usually work.
No. Well, I just mean, even if let's say someone gets hurt, there's not a whole lot out there, most likely. Shesterkin, no. Gorgiev, maybe, but probably not.
You're probably,
Aiden Hill's not. Charlie Lindgren, no.
Well, maybe.
I mean, maybe
one of Lindgren or Thompson, maybe, depending on where the cap season goes.
Yeah, possibly. So I guess they're in that same exact bucket as Chychrun and Mangiapane.
Yeah, the one goalie name that I was thinking about highlighting earlier, and then I didn't. Well, I guess there's 2 here. Maybe 3. Vanacek and Velzhmelka could be like you need a depth body.
Yeah.
Maybe you can pry like an Alex Lyon out of Detroit. Maybe, depending on where that season goes.
Yeah.
But Jake Allen was the one earlier that I was wondering where New Jersey would potentially be if a team was looking for a rental there. Jake Allen was the name that I had highlighted and then took off the list.
I don't think they move him.
Which is why,
because they probably end up sitting there like, okay, we need our own. We need a rental goalie. Like he's probably their own rental goalie.
I had highlighted him and then I'm like, nah, that
Yeah.
doesn't make a lot of sense. But if they wanted to ride Markstrom down this, I can't talk myself into it. I don't think so. Yeah.
So I guess basically the goalie market is real thin. So like if your team has an injury to your clear starter, good luck.
Maybe one of the Pittsburgh, not Jari, but maybe a Nedeljkovic or Joel Blomqvist could be another. But we're starting to really get down there now. Yeah. We'll end it before I throw James Reimer's name out there. Oh wait, I already did. Anyways, I mean there's very clear like backup depth guys that could be available,
right.
But yeah, getting some immediate help. You're maybe hoping Washington hits a rough patch and you can pry one of those two guys out. So I think that's pretty comprehensive. So I think that wraps up this episode. We'll maybe get into the RFAs a little bit more at some point value-wise and talk about that landscape. But I think this what we talked about in this episode made complete sense to just kind of go that direction. So we appreciate you listening. Max Term Podcast available on pretty much all major podcast platforms. These contract projections that we referenced, X at AFP Analytics. At some point, maybe we'll start posting on some other platforms as well. Cross-posting. We have accounts on both Threads and Blue Sky at AFP Analytics. So follow us if you're listening. So when we do start posting, we feel like we're not just posting into a void, basically. So with that, we'll talk to you next time.